Hello guys, and welcome back to this next episode of how to make an environment in Unreal. In the previous episode we finished up the materials and or the textures. I've imported them in Unreal. So this is the one we made together, or this one. I made these ones with the same workflow I showed in the videos, and then this one is actually from Quixel, quickly imported one. I'll probably replace it at some point, but for now this will do. They all run on a really basic material. Here you can see it. It's just 3 different textures imported. That's it. There's nothing happening really. I made them parameters, so I can swap them out. If you open up here, you can replace the textures. And yeah, those are the materials. So for today, the plan is to start modeling the assets. These are still very much blockout assets. But before we're going to do that, there's a bunch of stuff we can already put in the engine. So that's what I want to do first. I want to import, or I want to apply some of the materials already on the scene, on the walls and on the floors, and set up some basic lighting and some basic materials that will have a big impact on the scene, I think. And then we'll go ahead and model a few assets. So that's the plan for today. Yeah, so we got these materials, they're ready. First, let's apply one to the floor. I want it to affect all the, I don't want to do it like one by one. So if we want the effect to be on all of them at the same time, we just open up the model. So here it is. And we drag our floor tile material on there. And there you go. We have a floor material. It's everywhere now. And I want to do the same for these square wall pieces. I'm doing this right now because they're just squares. That means that their UVs fill up the entire square as well. So it should just work pretty much from the get-go. So we take our stone tile, put it on there. There we go. So that's already looking like something. The next thing I want to do is, yeah, there's one issue, and that's that there's a bit of a discrepancy between what the textures look like in Substance Painter and in Unreal. In my case, they look a bit more saturated and a bit more, a bit darker. There are 2 things that can affect this. One is the lighting, and one is just the engine itself. So to take care of that, we're gonna adjust this basic material a little bit so we can tweak the colors so it matches our material in Painter a bit better. And we're also gonna adjust the lighting in our scene. Let's start with the material. So we're gonna open up the basic one. I want this effect to apply on, I want these parameters on all of the materials, so I'll just do it in this one. The first thing we want to adjust is the color map. So we're gonna move this over. How to make this, by the way, is you just take a texture, you drag it in there, and if you want this to be a parameter, you right click it, convert to parameter, give it a name, and now you can adjust this in the material instance. So the first thing I want to do is make it so you can make the texture darker or brighter. So we're gonna multiply this with a constant. You can do that 2 ways. Or parameter. If you want to make a parameter, you can right click and add a constant. That's one way. You can also hold 1 and press, and you get a constant, and then right click and make it a parameter. Or you'll hold the letter S, and that'll make a parameter as well. this brightness and set it to 1. See if I can preview what this does. Here you can see it. So here's our texture. If we make this like 0.5, it should become darker. Or 0.1. Yeah, so it's darker. And one issue, if you want to make it brighter, you have to go above 1. But if you go above 1, it'll start to glow light. So if we make it like 1,000, there you go. Now it's emitting light. We don't want that. So we want to clamp it, which sets the values between 0 and 1 again. And there we go. So now it's just pure white if I put it on 1,000. And if we increase it a little bit, 14. Yeah, this becomes a bit whiter. The next thing we want to adjust is the saturation. So for some reason, there's a saturation node in Unreal, but it's called desaturation. So if we want to adjust this, I would recommend putting a 1- in there. So the saturation becomes the desaturation. It's kind of inverted. And as you can imagine, if I put the saturate on 0, it becomes black and white. And then finally, let's say you want to give it another color. We can add a vector3 node and make it a parameter, call it color. And this will kind of overlay a different color. So if we preview this one, see now it's red. So just put this on white. And those are all the adjustments I want for the basic color. So let's clean this up a little bit. It's not too cluttered. Something like that. That's our multiplier here. And then let's add a comment. Call this albedo, and I like to make them black. Looks a little cleaner. Oh. Okay, now it's loading. Next thing we want to adjust is the normal. How I do this is I add a lerp. You do that by holding L and clicking somewhere. And we want to lerp between like a pure black or pure blue color, which means that there's no normal information, and our normal. Then we make another parameter, call it normal strength. What this does is, if our normal strength is at 0, it'll select this one. If it's at 1, it'll select this one. Kind of transitions between the two. And if we go beyond 1, it'll take this value and kind of increases it even more so. So now we can adjust the intensity of our normal map. Again, add a comment, call it normal. And then we have this one. This texture basically packs a bunch of black and white textures together into a single color image. So we're using the red, green, blue, and alpha channel. At the moment we're not using the alpha channel, but I'm putting the height mapping there in case we want to do some displacement later on. So let's adjust these. I don't want to adjust the metallic. That's fine. We'll leave that as is. And then for our roughness, I want to add a power node and a multiply node. Add a multiply by holding M. The roughness is the green channel. And then I add another parameter, call it roughness roughness contrast, and roughness intensity, both the value of 1. What this does is the power will kind of decide the fall off of the roughness. So if it reflects the light, you'll see this like white glow, for example, and the fall off of that glow will become smaller, and then the multiply will decide how reflective this material is. So we put this into our roughness. And then we also have our ambient occlusion. Do we want to adjust that? Yeah, we can do that. Why not? Call it AO intensity. Put this in ambient occlusion. And that's it, really. To keep things clean, let's group the parameters, because right now they'll all be put into one big list. So we grab these ones and we'll call it Edo. This one will be normal. This one will be AO. And these roughness. Then also let's grab the texture inputs and group them in textures. Set the priority to 99, so they're at the bottom. And now if we save this, we should get a bunch of parameters in our material instance. So let's grab our stone wall. And here you can see we can play with these values. Let's see what happens. Usually I do this on another screen, so I have to fiddle around a bit. Let's enable them. And okay, maybe we want our textures to be a bit brighter. So as you can see, they're becoming brighter. If we drag this one, maybe we want them to have less color. Let's do that. And you see how nice this is. Like, this is a really easy iterative process. We don't have to go back into another program. And besides that, we can make a bunch of variations on this material. Like maybe you want a white wall somewhere. We don't have to make another set of textures. We can just duplicate this material instance, adjust these values, and you have a completely different wall, which is a lot cheaper for the game. So maybe we want the normal to be a lot more intense. This kind of happens if you go too far. It's kind of turns black. For now, I'll just leave this one at a 1. That's fine. Maybe we want this to be a little less reflective. To decrease this. Here you can see if I decrease this, it becomes more reflective. If I increase it, now it's super rough. And if I play with this one, you can see that the fall off is kind of it decreases. But for now, I think this is fine. So we'll leave this let that as well. We'll come back to this later. I'm just kind of showcasing how this works. Okay, let's save it. All right, so let's see what's next. The lights. Yeah, let's add some lights to our scene. So there's already some lights in my scene. I guess for sake of demonstration, I could delete them. Just turns everything black. If it doesn't, it means you've probably made your scene within the starter scene that Unreal starts up with, and it has some baked lights in there, so it probably looks a bit bluish. To get rid of this stuff, because you don't want to have any baked lights at first, because it's really annoying to iterate on, you have to go to your world settings. It's here, settings, world settings. I drag mine over here, and then type in force, enable this, click yes, and then build your lights. And then when you're done, disable it. What it does is it kind of deletes your, or it turns all the light maps to black, which is nothing really. So now we have no lights in our scene. The first thing I like to add is a skylight. You can see it. Let's set it to movable. And some of you, like if you don't have a skyscraper, for example, so you have a black sky, what some of you might notice is that this skylight is not doing anything. If you drag it into your scene, it'll stay black. If you increase your intensity, it'll stay black still. So how this works is it makes an image of your scene, turns it into a like a skybox texture, and then uses that color information to project light on your scene, and that way it creates ambient lighting. So if you want this to work, you can do two things. You can add in your own specified skybox in here. So for example, daylight scene or another texture. There you go. Or you put it on captured scene and press this recapture button, which it'll generate its own skybox texture. But obviously it's still black, and that's because it just made a black texture because our scene is black, and black does not have light information, therefore it stays black. So if you have a skybox, for example, where's mine? Skysphere like this, and now you press recapture. You can see now it does work. If you want a quick skysphere in your scene, you have to go to your engine content. Just type in sky, and then there's a bunch like this one, for example. This one, that's it's the same as this one. Just drag it in there, scale it up, and you got yourself a skysphere. If you cannot find this folder, you have to go to view options and enable show engine content, and then you can find it. So yeah, that's a skylight. I'm grabbing my reference now here. Let's see. I'm gonna look at these pictures for some information on what kind of light I want. So maybe this is a bit too bright, I don't know. It's just the skylight, you use it just to get rid of the pure blacks in your scene, because it's never pure black. I think in this case, you know what? I also want a different sky. I don't quite like this sky. So let's make our own skybox. It's not too difficult. go into your material folder. Let's make a new material. Call it sky. Okay. And now what you want to do is, actually first you need to find some skyboxes. So I downloaded a few. You can find some on a website called hdrihaven.com. And just go through here, find one you like, maybe this one, download it at a resolution. I downloaded mine at 2K. Should be fine. If not, you can buy or download a higher resolution. They're all free. And then when you import them, it's kind of important to go in here and under MIP Gen settings, select no MIP maps. So you can see the resolution just went up because we don't want this to compress. We always want the max resolution on this thing. So when you've done that, you drag it into your material. Let's turn this into a parameter so we can change it later on. Call it HRI. And again, I want to add some abilities to change this. So let's add our intensity. So the higher the intensity, the brighter the light is going to be that's being emitted from the skybox. And then let's also add the desaturation node again, same as the last material. I want some control over the color in the scene. Add these and a color. Great. So for our skybox, we don't need shadows on it. Like we want it, that's going to look really fake. So we can put it on unlit, because we don't need lighting information on our skybox, and then drag this into the emissive. And it will give you an error because an HDRI is kind of a special material or texture. It's not a normal one. So to fix that, you can add a reflection vector. There you go. Now it should work. You can see your skybox. I want to add a little bit more control. Like I want the ability to rotate the texture. I think that's nice. So to do that, we're going to make a rotate about axis node. We add a 3 vector. Get a small, put it on 1. That means it's going to rotate around the up axis. So it'll rotate like this, and not like this, not like this. Then we need the variable that allows us to rotate it. Rotate, put that in the angle. The pivot point can be just the center of the object. And then we need a world position node. Put that in position. Then we need to add this rotation on top of the world position. And then we need to normalize this information and put it in the UVs. So that's that. It's now done. We have our material. Right click it, make a material instance, call it mi sky, and I'd like to put this one in the top folder of materials. Just drag it onto the sky. There we go. So now we have our custom skybox. And if we update our skylight, it adjusts to this skybox. It's pretty nice. Let's open up our instance. Go to our textures. Let's play around. Like maybe we want to enable this. Maybe we want a different texture. Maybe this one. Oh. I left the default value of saturation on 0, so it's all black and white. Let's put it on 1. So I kind of like the sky of this one. If we enable these ones, you can see, and now I can rotate the texture. I can also increase the intensity. So for here, you can see it kind of, it's almost like it's glowing. And then obviously we have our saturation, which makes it black. And we can also give it a color if we want. So let's sit in here. This is our main viewport. Let's see what we like. Rotate it a bit. A little saturated, maybe also a bit darker. Something like that. So that's nice. Let's save it. Let's update our skylight, see if we like it. If we don't like it, we can also use custom HDRI. Well, this is actually, it's pretty decent. Maybe less intense. Let's leave it at 1 for now. Maybe 7.5. Obviously, this looks really dark. This is, again, just the ambient light. The next thing we're going to do is add a directional light. This is the sun, basically. Put it on movable. Let's see. Make it a little less intense. All right, that will do. Let's put this in the light folder. We also have a post-process volume, which is kind of important. If you don't have it yet, we went over this earlier on in the series. All I've done in here is set the exposure to 1 and then enable infinite bounds, so you don't have to be inside this little square for it to work. But I want to do one more thing in here, and that's add some ambient occlusion. So click ambient, enable these. If we increase this value, you can play with it. Like without it, it looks very gamey. It feels like it's 3D geometry. It doesn't feel like it's integrated well in the scene. So if we increase this, add some contact shadows, and then maybe we want the radius to be a bit smaller as well. Yeah, so you can play with that. I like this. Now, what is the next step? Still think it's, I'm not quite happy with the lighting at the moment. I think we can do better. Let's see what other, like what it looks like if you use specified Q maps and drag a few in there. One sec. Maybe this one. This one. I don't know. Not sure if I like this. Yeah, so this is a lot of tweaking, and I'll keep tweaking this probably until the end of the project. Like this. This one's okay. Let's increase the ambience a bit more. One thing I also want to do in this scene is add a rectangular light. What does this is it's literally just a rectangle that emits light, and I think since we have this square with this big square light that comes down, it'll add like some nice ambience here. So let's see, where do we set the size? We just no. Oh, that's why. I had A typed in there, so it's not showing all the parameters. Let's increase the width and the height. Move it up. Also put this on movable. We'll bake our lights probably at the end, if at all. Like for now, let's just leave everything on movable. And increase our intensity. Of course, also the radius. So yeah, there are some artifacts in there. We'll deal with those later. For now, we'll just decrease the attenuation radius. I think that's kind of causing it. Do I like this? Yeah, that's some nice ambience. Some light as well. And now I also want to add some reflection captures, so we get accurate reflections in our scene. Since everything is a cube pretty much, we can add cube reflections. I think this one, yeah, this one you can just scale like this. Just the width like that. So the square is kind of in the walls. Let's add a few more for these smaller areas. Oh, it's freezing. 1 sec. Alright, it decided to crash completely, but don't worry, you didn't miss much. I just added a few of these. Let's group them. Reflections, lights, and then going to build reflecting captures. So save everything just to be sure. Now you can see we have some accurate reflections. If I disable this, this is what it was before. This is after. You can actually kind of see the reflections of this big light coming in, which we couldn't before. So the next thing I want to add is some atmospheric fog. I think that adds a bit of realism. Don't want to add too much, but yeah. So first, let's actually put the rectangle light a bit higher because it's clipping. By the way, to fix these light lines, you can see here, you have to press this little arrow, go into shadow bias and just increase that. Put it on 2 for now. It's going to increase performance a bit, but for a scene like this, it's not too bad. Especially when we're going to bake it later on. Also, I don't want this to cast shadows, so it's just to add some ambient light. I think it's also gonna fix our shadow lines, yeah, because it's the shadows that were causing the issues. There we go. So now it's just adding a bit of an ambience. Right, fog. So type in fog, not the hide fog. Drag it into the scene, and if you increase it, so let's put it on 0.1 for example, here you can clearly see what it's doing. So I'd like to put the height fall off on 1 and then the cutoff distance on like 100,000, so it still shows the sky. Then I think for this, let's add a different color to our light, maybe very desaturated, like orange, kind of imitates the sand that's in the air here because it's right next to a desert. Let's put the density. Point 0.5 is right. We want to start it a bit later, a bit further in the scene. Okay, let's disable these characters again. And yeah, now it's a matter of just tweaking these values we went over until we have something that you're happy with. I think the skylight is a bit too intense, for example. So the hide fog. Disable the directional light for a moment. Don't know why it's shining in here. There's a ceiling above here. It should be blocking the light. Let's duplicate this. Does it help? Let's see. No. Could add a cube in here. I think it might do a bit of a better job blocking light. Does that work? No, whatever. It's fine. A bit more ambient occlusion. What we also can do is go in here in the lower hemisphere color. Means it just makes the bottom half of the skybox black because it usually does not emit light through the ground. But we can adjust this to kind of fake bounce light in our scene, like maybe because there's a lot of yellows in our scene, maybe we can make this a little bit more orange to kind of fake the effect that light bounces on the ground and then bounces back like the yellowish color. You can see it before and after. It's very subtle. And do keep in mind that we're going to fill this scene with lots of these warm point lights through all the little lights. You can see them. Lots of these. So I'm trying to keep that in mind when I'm adding my lights. I want it to be very atmospheric. There's going to be lots of this stuff there. We can play with this as well. Let's see what this would look like if we add a few of these atmospheric lights in the scene. Another thing you want to ask yourself, and later on in this project, we're going to come back to light and really finish it off. So don't worry if I gloss over some things. But one thing to keep in mind is where do you want the viewer or the player to look at? Like, what is their main focus? And I think for us, it's this upper area. That's where we want the player to look the most. So this is going to be a big point. That's also why I'm pointing the directional light on it to kind of like a big spotlight. Like, look over here. But I also think it's kind of flattening the scene in some way. I'm not quite happy with the directional light yet. So we're coming back to that later. Let's add maybe a few lights in here. Just playing around, see what works. Get some nice light bleeding in. Maybe one in here as well. There's going to be a well in here. Saw that in the reference. A water well. This is already adding some atmosphere to the scene. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And what I'm also going to do is, we have these windows here. I'm going to fake an interior behind it at some point. That's going to emit some light as well. So yeah, pretty happy with that. Maybe a light in there too. Maybe we don't want a directional light for our scene. Maybe because it's a very cloudy day. It kind of breaks up the very clear directional light. Maybe we want to rely on our rectangular light without shadows. We could increase its intensity a bit, maybe 300, and then that's a bit too much, I think, 200 maybe, and decrease the skylight, but disable it. bit too much. Maybe decrease the distance of this light. Just the skylight again. Don't want to spend too much time on this. Yeah, I think I'm going to delete the directional light for now and just rely on this one skylight or this one rectangular light. It makes it feel a bit more realistic. Could even add a bit of a color to the light. For now, let's disable that. Cool, we could rebuild the reflections, and they're kind of messed up for some reason. Don't know why. Oh, it's because of these point lights. Okay, for now, I'm gonna group these point lights, put them in lights as well. Disable it. Build the reflections. Or isn't that it? Okay. That's strange. I'm not sure why this is an issue. Maybe it's clipping too much to the ceiling. Okay, I'm not quite sure why it's doing this. I'll try and fix that at a later point. Some final tweaks to the slide. Could enable shadows, but I think it looks a little too dark. Now I'll disable it for now. So what I'm probably gonna do is the top part of this scene is gonna be lit primarily by this rectangular light. You can see an extreme version. And then the bottom part is gonna be lit with lots of little lamps and lanterns and candles. Kind of like separated to two halves. Okay, there are some artifacts with the reflections. I'm not sure why, but it is what it is. I think that kind of wraps up the lighting part of this episode. Like already, it feels like this kind of brought the scene to life a lot. I think next up, I'll do some modeling, but I want to do one more thing. I have this cool idea. Like you can see a little bit of repetition in this wall, and I've got an idea on how to break up the repetition. And that's to kind of shuffle these bricks. As you can see, they're kind of like all of them are sitting neatly on this clean horizontal line. I can't shuffle them vertically because they're all kind of random, but horizontally they're all the same. So what I want to do is, yeah, shuffle them around a bit. So that's what we're going to do. I still want the same parameters to be on this. We're gonna have to make a new material for this because it's gonna have some unique stuff. But I also want this stuff to be in there. So it might be an idea to put this into its own function. So what we're gonna do is a function is basically a group, but it's it's like a little sub material. So we're going to materials and textures. You know what? Is it actually possible? Let's see. I haven't tried this. Select everything in here. And make this a function in here. No, I don't think so. So let's make our tail function in here. mf underscore adjustments or something. Paste it in here. Now we want a few outputs in the form of a color. So we call this albedo. Call this one normal. This AO. Roughness and italic. So these are our outputs. And then we want some inputs as well, the textures primarily. We take our input. This is going to be a texture 2D. Well, this might have to be a texture or a it might have to be a texture cube. Let's see how we're going to do this. Okay, so we have a texture sample, and this will probably have to be a texture cube. Copy it, make it a texture object. Okay, so that's it. This is how this is going to work. That's albedo. We also need a normal. Let's put an actual normal in the preview, but it doesn't really matter. And then we also need one for this one. This will probably give an error. Oh no, actually it automatically updates to linear color. Call this mask. I'm gonna delete these. Place these. It's a little tedious at first, but this is going to save us some headaches later on in the project because it's all clean in its own project. Now if we save this, we can move these over, delete all this, break this connection. And we have to turn this into textual objects. Just it's not letting me. So let's grab them again, delete them. Turn them into a texture object. And then turn them into a parameter. Call them, give them their original names. And it kind of messes up the preview texture, or yeah. So we'll do that. Let's also group them again. What should we call it? Textures. And now what you can do is go into our materials and drag our material function in here, and it looks like this. One more thing. This is, you don't have to do this, but this is just me being perfectionist. So let's change the sorts. So albedos at the top, normals in the middle, and then this one's on the bottom. I like to adjust these as well. So I want normal to be the second one. R M. So albedo goes in here, normal here. Not good enough. We could actually do that. So make this one 4, 3. And this one. So now it should all be neatly lined. Yes, awesome. Save it, and it should all be the same. It might be that we have to reassign some textures, but no, like everything is still the same. But it's all it's a little dark outside. But yeah, it still works the same. It's just now inside this function. And why this is important is because I can duplicate this. Oh, not this one, this one. Call it material bricks. This one will work the same. Like if I decide to adjust something in here, it'll apply to both materials. Now we need another input in here. Set it to a vector 2. Call it UV. We put in a texture coordinate, which is just a basic UV without any adjustments, and we're going to put it in the UV channel of the textures. This allows us to adjust UVs and this. So enable use preview value. Let's do that for all of them actually. So there's at least something when we plug it in, and it won't give you an error. So there you go. So now we can adjust this. We're going to leave this empty on the basic one because we're not going to adjust it over there. But you could, like maybe you wanted to tile If so, you can add a multiply in there. But what we're going to do is make it so the stones shuffle horizontally. So to do that, the first thing we need to do is, well, we're going to adjust the UV. So first we're going to add in a texture coordinate, multiply it. Then we're going to add an append. What append does is it takes two values, like 1 and 6, it doesn't matter, two numbers, and makes it a vector of a 2 vector, because a texture coordinate is also a 2 vector. You can see one is red, one is green. It means there's like a x and y value, and we want to adjust both the x and y. So let's add some parameters. Call this row x and row y. So for this one, we only have one. We're not gonna adjust this one because yeah, we just want. Let's say you have square tiles. You could also shuffle it vertically, but for now, let's leave the x at 1, put the y on 7. There are 7 rows, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8. So let's put it on 8 for now, but you could adjust this later. Let's say if you have a different material, you can, with like 10 rows, you can put it on 10 and it still works. Then what we're going to do is add a floor node, which rounds it up or down. And what this will do is, here you can see that it's took this value and it's kind of added these steps that now align with the texture. So we have eight rows of bricks, and now we also have 8 rows of UV stuff that we can adjust separately. And then I'm going to add a 1 value, because as you can see, the top row is black because it starts at 0 and it goes to 1. And if we're going to multiply this on something, it's always going to multiply by 0, and the top bar will always remain black because 0 times whatever remains 0. So if we add 1, now it goes from 1 to 2. Now we need a random value because I want it to be random on whatever position the object is. Because if it's not random, you would still see repetition. So we're going to add the actor position, and we're going to split it because there's an X, Y, and Z position, and we only want the Z, or the Z position. This is because if we would also shuffle it if the object moves to the left or right, there would be a disconnect at these edges. So if they're at the same height position, they should align. So therefore, we're only adjusting the height. Then something I'm gonna do is add like a random value. Doesn't matter, just add like some whatever value. And the next step, this is all a bit odd, I know, but it'll work. Let's also clean this up a bit by calling this steps. And random. So we're actually gonna take these steps and give them random colors based on the random position. We're gonna do this by adding a dot product. and then put that into a sine wave. And I think you should be able to see it already. No, won't see it here because the active position. Why is this? Oh, oops. This is in the wrong. Okay, so let's add a random, whatever. Doesn't matter what it is, just something like that. There you go. So now you can see, because this value is random, it's kind of our seed. I'm adding on top. You're seeing random values there. So now what I'm going to do is multiply it again with this, just to be sure that it's working. It's just like you don't need this, I guess, but like, just to be sure. And then what we're going to do is multiply it with a parameter called intensity. So if it's at 0, it's not going to shuffle. If it's at 100, it's going to shuffle a lot. Let's move it over a bit. And then finally, I want to append it like with this. Append it with the 0, because I only want this to shuffle on the x-axis, and I want to shuffle it 0 times the y-axis. And then we're gonna, this is the final one, we're gonna add it on top of our texture coordinate, our base UVs, and plug this into our UVs. I believe this should work now. It's a little detail, but it's great, I think. Yeah, just save it. I think there's an error somewhere. This looks fine. It's not it. It's not giving me any errors. What is the matter? This should be linear color. Maybe that's the issue. Don't know why it's not giving me an error. Okay, hold on while I try to fix this. No, there was no error. It just was updating and not telling me it was updating. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our stone material, replace the basic with the bricks, and it'll give us a few extra options. The rows are already good, so we're going to leave that at 8. And now if we increase the intensity, oh, it's the wrong material. Oops, sorry. Leave that basic. Need this is the one. Select basic, swap it out for bricks, increase the intensity. Now you can see that it's almost like a Harry Potter wall, like moving all on different axes. And if I duplicate it, move it up, you can see it's also shuffling. And if I move it horizontally, it's not. And that's important because if it would, let's see if I move it a little bit, you can see that there's a disconnect now. So therefore it's really important it's only moving when you move it upwards. So it'll stay aligned when you move something next to it. Okay, so that really is it. That's the last thing in Engine. All right, I'm quite happy with it. All looks good. All right, well, the recording is already more than an hour in, I see. So what I think I'm gonna do is call this episode done and then fully focus on modeling and applying our pre-made textures on there in the next episode. So with that, I think I'm gonna wrap this one up and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.